experts in their field. Today we're a fascinating guest. We're going to move over to the world of non-fiction books, so it's going to be really interesting. Well, fiction books, I should say. We've got Peter James, UK #1 best-selling author, best known for writing crime and thriller novels. Welcome to the show, Peter. Well, great to have you on board.
Thanks, Jimmy. Good to talk to you.
Fantastic. So, just give us a bit of insight into what sort of inspired you to write Stop Them Dead.
Okay, well, Stop Them Dead is about the black market trade in adult dogs and puppies that exploded during lockdown. Just as a sort of to reassure everyone listening who loves dogs, I am one of the biggest dog lovers in the world. I could not describe any dog being harmed. So I can promise you that I've not written about any dogs being harmed in the book. I've written plenty about villains involved in the dog trade being harmed, but not dogs. And Stop Them Dead, the inspiration for it was when I read an article in the local Brighton paper, the Argus, about 2.5 years ago, that a woman had been mugged walking her dog in a park in the centre of the city, and the dog stolen. And I read on, and it was a Springer Spaniel breeding bitch, and it was worth £5,000, and I was utterly astonished at that value. And I also thought, my God, yeah, if you're mugged, that's bad enough. But if you had your watch stolen or your wallet or whatever, at least you got a chance of getting something back on insurance, and you get over it. If you had the beloved dog stolen, which is not just it's part of your life and soul, how would you feel? And I knew that how gutted my wife and I would be, and you'd be thinking, well, where is that wonderful dog now? What bastard's got it? What's happening? And that was the kind of the trigger for the book. And then I met the Chief Constable of Sussex, who is herself a big dog lover, and I said, what was all that about, that dog being stolen? And she said, that is the tip of the iceberg. There's a massive crime wave across the UK that started during lockdown and still continues, where organised crime gangs have found they can make more money out of dogs than out of drugs, either by illegally importing them, through illegally farming them, puppy farms, and literally stealing dogs out in the streets. And she said, for instance, a particular shade of colour of breeding blue French bulldog bitch can change hands for £100,000, and the puppy's £25,000. And you realise what big money there is in that world of the creatures we love so much. And that's what gave me the idea for the book.
That's really interesting, and that's something that I wasn't aware of, and know that many listeners weren't as well. And in terms of the actual book itself, I mean, you kind of sort of spoke about, sort of alludes sort of characters possibly in the book, but are there any of your characters based on people you know?
Yes, I base pretty well every character, whether it's the police or the villains, on people that I know and met. But I guess the central character, Roy Grace, brilliantly portrayed by John Sim in the Grace TV series, was based. He's very much based on a detective that I met back in 1987 called Dave Gaylor, and Dave was a detective inspector then in Brighton Police, and I had an introduction to him, and I just needed a bit of help on a novel I was writing called Denial, and he just astonished me. I was halfway through the book. He said, "Tell me about it," and I started telling about it, and he said, "Hang on a sec, why is your central character not doing this, and why haven't you gone outside inquiring? And I don't think that lady would have done that. Wouldn't she have done this?" And I realised this guy had a really creative brain. And it's something that I've learned subsequently, that what makes a really good homicide detective is not just being a methodical, tough copper. It's having a really big heart and having a really high degree of emotional intelligence. And Dave, over the next 4 years, helped me on subsequent novels I was writing. This was all pre-Roy Grace. And he was promoted to Detective Superintendent, head of major crime for Sussex. in 2002, and my publishers asked, have you ever thought of creating a detective as a central character? So I went to Dave and I said, how would you like to be a fictional cop? And he loved the idea. And he became my real life Roy Grace. We've worked together very closely on all 19 books. I'm writing the 20th at the moment. And he reads every 100 pages, and we discuss all the aspects of policing and how Roy Grace would actually behave. So it's given me not only a model, but it's given me a tremendous amount of authenticity to the series, which is very important to me. And I think readers can tell if a writer knows the subject, and to me it's really important.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and you kind of gave us a bit of an insight in terms of the, what sort of some of the attributes that make an ultimate fictional detective. But is that something you could expand on, sort of, Pete, in terms of what would make the ultimate fictional detective?
What would make the ultimate fictional detective?
Yeah.
Well, I always joke. I say if I was unlucky enough to have a member of my family murdered, Roy Grace is the detective I'd want running the case. So I guess from my standpoint, he is the ultimate fictional detective. But I think that it's a really good question. I was a big fan when I was younger of Sherlock Holmes and of Agatha Christie. And Sherlock Holmes is a brilliant creation. A phenomenally incisive mind, detailed guy at the same time. He's in many ways the perfect fictional detective, except one thing is that he doesn't really change throughout the 4 novels and the countless short stories, Conan Doyle. He's always the same at the beginning and the end. And it's the same with Miss Marple and Poirot. They deal with all kinds of grim stuff, but it doesn't have any impact on them. Whereas in real life, I think it's what I've seen. All the detectives homicide detectives I've met over many years, I've been going out with the police, not just here, but in many other countries around the world. One question I do always ask them is, I say, has your job changed you? And every single one says yes. And it's changed them in a number of ways. Firstly is they are dealing in their job with incredibly dark stuff, dark things that most of us are spared from, fortunately, other than reading about it obliquely in news or fiction. They're actually dealing with this stuff. I have a friend who's in the police, and he was a traffic cop, and he was first on the scene about 12, 15 years ago now, husband and wife divorcing, and the wife tried to set up the husband, and she murdered their 2 children, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, gassed them, and then put them in the boot of the car, and framed it so that it looked like her husband had done it. And this officer, a friend of mine, was first on the scene, and he had to try to resuscitate them without, obviously, success. They'd been dead for a good hour before he got there. And then he has to go home and bath and put to bed his own 3- and 5-year-old. And we forget that about detectives, that they are actually normal people, but often having to do the most horrific things that none of us could even imagine doing.
Absolutely, and I could imagine that over a prolonged period of time that would have an impact on anybody in have to sort of experience that sort of exposure. What you've mentioned there is must be difficult to sort of to deal with. And just for our listeners who are interested to know more about Stopped and Dead when it's out, and where they can sort of go out and purchase a pre-order. Peter, could you share the details of when it actually comes out and where our listeners can purchase the book by pre-order?
Sure. Stop and Dead comes out on September the 28th in hardback and audio and also Kindle. You can pre-order it on Amazon. Also in hard copy, you can put from your local bookshop or from pretty well any bookstore around the UK. And also I've got a second book coming out. The first 7 chapters are actually at the back of Stop and Dead, and for all fans of Roy Grace who are interested in the story of his missing wife, I have this standalone novel coming out next May, which is all about Roy's missing wife. In fact, the novel is called They Thought I Was Dead, Sandy's Story, and you can read the teasing first 7 chapters at the back of Stop Them Dead.
Brilliant, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be familiar with your work, Peter. For those who are new to your work or looking into it, is there any way you can signpost them in terms of like any sort of website or any sort of details they can have a look and see more about the work that you've done?
Absolutely. My website is very easy. It's peterjames.com, and that gives you all my books. It tells you all the appearances that I'm doing, when and where I'm doing them, and a lot of general information about my background and what I'm working on.
Brilliant, that's great. Sorry, Peter. Yeah.
Sorry, Stop Them Dead is the 19th of Roy Grace series. You can read the series in any order. So if you've never read a Roy Grace before, you can start with Stop Them Dead. You get a little bit more out if you go through the whole series in sequence, but you can go back. And I've worked very closely with the RSPCA on this book, and one of the things that we have done is try to put, they're not sort of big didactic lessons, but we've put little tips in how that if you read the book, you'll learn how to avoid buying a stolen dog or an illegally puppy farm dog or illegally imported dog. There's some real tricks of the trade that the illegal puppy trade use. One of them is, have I got time for this?
Absolutely, yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
One of them, and it features in the book as part of the story. One of the storylines is you want to buy a puppy, and they're very clever. The illegal operators, they advertise on all the usual sites like Gumtree and Pets for Home. And let's say you're looking for a puppy and you see this adorable golden doodle on one of these sites, and you've got a kid, and the kid goes, "Oh, that's the puppy I'd like. That's the puppy I'd like." So you make an appointment and you go down and see it, and it's only 3-4 weeks old, and you arrive, and wow, it's a beautiful house. Beautiful garden, wonderfully kept, and you think, oh, these must be really caring people. And you go in and you're really focused on the dog. So focused on the dog, you don't actually look around, and you don't notice some of the clues. You don't notice that there are no photos, no family photos anywhere in this beautiful house. That's a bit odd. And you also don't notice the dog's mother isn't around. And the couple who are kind of selling the puppies, they're charming, and they say, and what you should do if you're buying a puppy is you go see it at 3-4 weeks. If you like it, you put a deposit, then you come back 8-10 weeks after it's had all its injections, and you take it with you. But they'll say, oh, we've actually got 10 people wanting this dog, so if you want it, you better buy it and take it today. And £3,000 cash. So you get sort of pressurized, you buy it, take it home. A week later, it'll probably get sick. You phone them up, they've gone. You find out it's an Airbnb, which they've literally just rented to sell this bunch of dogs that they've either stolen or imported illegally or bred. And that goes on a lot.
No, that sounds like a nightmare. That's gee. I mean, some of the things that sort of go on, I'm sure, it's just incredible, really. But I'm very grateful for your time, and I'll definitely sort of check the book out. That's for sure. I'm looking forward to sort of, having a read as well. And it's been a really interesting and informative interview with you. Fantastic. So thanks for your time, Peter, and all the best with the new release. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good talking to you.
Thank you.